You ever wake up at 3 a.m. and just can't fall back asleep? You think something's wrong with you. But here's the twist. For most of human history, that was completely normal. In fact, your ancestors planned their whole night around it. To understand what they did at night, first you have to go way back. Imagine living in a world with no walls, no locks, no electricity. You'd sleep outside while predators moved somewhere out in the darkness. You couldn't see them, but they could still be out there, and that made nighttime completely different from the way we experience it today. Imagine this. It's 100,000 years ago. The sun has disappeared, and you're staring into darkness you can't see through. And somewhere in that darkness, something could be hunting. Lions could be moving nearby. Hyenas could be searching through the grass. Wolves could be traveling across the plains. And even something as small as a snake could be dangerous. And you have no claws, no natural weapons that can compete with a predator. You're just a warm, sleeping body sitting on the ground in the dark. So humans looked for whatever protection they could find. Some climbed into trees, getting themselves above the ground. Others found rocky shelters and caves. Inside a cave, at least the darkness had an entrance you could watch. But there was something even more important than a shelter. They stayed together. Because when you're surrounded by darkness, more eyes are better than one. Everyone could watch, listen, and react if something approached. And then came something that completely changed the human night: fire. At first, humans had to approach it carefully, but once they learned to carry and control it, they could build their own fire wherever they lived. And suddenly, the darkness around them wasn't so powerful anymore. The flames created a small island of light in the middle of the night, and predators didn't always want to come anywhere near it. The darkness backed away from the fire. For humans, that meant something incredibly important: protection. But fire did more than scare predators away. It let humans see what they were doing after sunset. They could work on their tools, they could prepare food, and they could finally relax together. Around the fire, humans started to talk. They told stories, laughed, and shared experiences. They shared food, too. They could teach others how to make tools. They could communicate, learn, and pass knowledge from one person to another. Night had slowly changed from a time of fear into a time of community. The fire became the center of their nighttime world. People could simply sit there, watching the flames and thinking. And around that firelight, something else began to appear: stories on cave walls. Someone could point at a drawing and explain what it meant. Others could add their own images and ideas. The cave became a place to remember, teach, and share. Fire had effectively extended the day beyond sunset. Humans suddenly had extra hours to work, talk, learn, and create. The fire wasn't just survival anymore. It was almost like the world's first television. Eventually, though, the day was over and humans went to sleep. They would lie down as the moon rose over the camp. But here's where it gets weird. They didn't necessarily sleep continuously until morning. Sometimes they simply woke up in the middle of the night. Historians call this pattern segmented sleep, a first sleep and a second sleep. They'd go to bed after sunset and begin their first sleep. Then, several hours later, they could naturally wake up, and instead of immediately panicking, they could quietly get up. They could sit beside the dying fire and enjoy the quiet. Some people could use that time to repair their tools. Others could make something they needed for the next day. People could also simply talk. They could share stories while most of the camp was still asleep. In some old communities, people could even visit nearby shelters because neighboring homes could be surprisingly close together. So waking up at night didn't necessarily mean being completely alone. They could prepare or organize food for later. They could fix damaged tools. Some people could be awake while others continued sleeping. And after an hour or two, tiredness would return. So they'd go back to their sleeping place and begin their second sleep. The entire settlement would eventually become quiet again. The moon would continue across the sky while everyone slept. Then the first sunlight would finally appear, and Arjun would wake up feeling completely normal. You're probably thinking, okay, but how do we actually know this? Because we have receipts. Historians found old manuscripts describing nighttime sleep patterns. They compared diaries, letters, and other historical records. And in 16th and 17th century Europe, waking during the night was familiar enough to be written about. A 16th century doctor even described a first sleep followed by a period of wakefulness and then another sleep.
People would go to bed after sunset, then wake up during the night and spend some time awake, and eventually return to bed for another period of sleep. But historical records aren't our only clue. Scientists have also studied modern hunter-gatherer communities. One example is the Hadza of Tanzania. Researchers observed their nighttime activity and sleep patterns, and the patterns showed something fascinating. Nighttime awakenings are not unusual. Across different periods of human history, waking during the night appears again and again. So if this kind of nighttime rhythm was so common, what changed? The short answer, the Industrial Revolution. Factories introduced strict schedules, and workers had to follow them. Cities began changing too. Then artificial electric light started pushing darkness out of our lives. Eventually, cities could stay bright even at midnight. Human life had gone from firelight to electric light, screens, and smartphones. And now, at 3 a.m., you can lie awake staring directly into a glowing screen. That's a very different reaction from simply waking beside a fire. Your brain evolved in a world that looked nothing like this, yet today we can spend the middle of the night endlessly scrolling. Firelight once encouraged humans to slow down. Our brains developed in a world of darkness, stars, and fire. Now that same brain is surrounded by notifications, artificial light, and screens. We're caught between an ancient biological rhythm and a very modern lifestyle. And sometimes the best thing you can do is simply put the phone down and relax. Let the room become quiet again and let your body settle. So what did ancient humans actually do at night? They survived together. They guarded each other. They made tools. They shared food. They talked, learned, and spent time together. And when they woke up in the middle of the night, they didn't necessarily panic. They could simply sit quietly, watch the fire, and wait for sleep to return. Then they went back to sleep, and eventually morning came. So the next time you wake up at 3 a.m. and your hand reaches for your phone, maybe stop for a moment. Because somewhere inside you is a brain that evolved long before electricity, clocks, and smartphones. And maybe that ancient part of you isn't as strange as you think. So what do you do when you wake up in the middle of the night? Do you go straight back to sleep, or do you stay awake for a while? Tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. And if you want more strange, true stories from ancient history, subscribe, because the things our ancestors did at night will surprise you.